Sales objections are every beginner's worst nightmare. There is honestly nothing more frustrating than being deep into a sales call and thinking that everything is going well until you get hit with an objection the moment that you mention the price. And that is why it is so important to prepare for objections in advance and understand the best strategies to overcome them. If executed correctly, your sales call should close without any objections. The goal here isn't just to overcome them, but to make closing deals as effortless as possible. And this can actually be done using prevention objection techniques, which I'm going to teach you in just a second. But it's important to know that a good closer knows how to handle objections, but a great closer knows how to prevent them from ever even coming up. However, even the best closers face challenging situations now and then. So sometimes knowing how to nip them in the bud will help you sign a whole lot more clients. And that is exactly what we're going to cover in today's video. So the 5-step process to overcome any SMMA objection. But before we get into that, you need to know how to prevent objections from ever coming up. You see, on every single sales call, before you get into pricing, you need to do 2 things. Firstly, you need to make sure that the prospect has all their questions answered. You don't want to go into pricing without making sure of that, because at the end of the day, a confused buyer never buys. So if you have a prospect who has a bunch of questions, then you shouldn't go straight into pricing before answering them, because they are simply not going to buy. Secondly, you need to do a 1 to 10 tie down. So the way that this actually looks in practice is, just so we're on the same page, on a 1 to 10 scale, with a 1 being get me off this call right now, and a 10 being this is exactly what I've been looking for, where do you fall? You see, asking this question serves a dual purpose. It not only helps you gauge the prospect's level of interest, but also provides you with a clear indication of any doubts that they might have. For example, if they say they are an 8 or less out of 10, then you need to question it. So that way you can get an idea of what might be missing from their point of view. So you can say something along the lines of, gotcha, appreciate you sharing that with me. Out of curiosity, what's stopping you from being a 9 or a 10? This will give you clarity about what their main concerns are and how to address them, which should help you get them closer to a 10. Now, this technique ensures that by the time you discuss pricing, the prospect is already sold on your offer, because you do not want the goal to be handling objections. You want the goal to be the prospect pulling out their credit card. One thing I always remind students is that it doesn't have to be hard, and you don't want it to be. In fact, you want it to be as easy as possible. You see, when I was taking on sales calls, that was always my goal. And if you do everything right, as I covered in one of my other videos, I'll pop around here somewhere, which is my step-by-step guide to closing clients for your SMA in 2024, you're not gonna have that many objections. But if you do, in today's video, I'm gonna cover how to actually handle them. Before we start, what I want you to do right now is this. I want you to grab a pen and paper, put your phone on airplane mode, clear out any distractions, and just take notes of everything that I'm going to be going over. The knowledge that I will be sharing with you today has already helped thousands of students in my program, Agency Accelerator, to not only prevent, but also overcome objections in their sales calls, and the results speak for themselves. Just like Jacob, who's been signing clients for his agency month on month since joining, or take Aiden, one of my favorite student success stories. After just 4 weeks, he reached $12,000 with his agency servicing real estate agents, thanks to the guidance from our lead sales coach, Scott Brunning, all inside of the Agency Accelerator community. So if you're serious about improving as an agency owner and want to be perceived as a highly valued professional in the industry, sitting back and just watching won't do it. Pen, paper, and no distractions. So let's get into it. Now, the first thing you need to understand is that every single objection is essentially a trust-based objection. They either don't trust you, your agency, or themselves. And the faster you realize this truth, the quicker you will succeed, because most objections are trust-based, but they're disguised as something else. You know, no one's gonna come out and outright say, I don't trust you, and I think you're lying, so I'm not gonna buy from you. Listen, that's just human nature. Instead, they're gonna use what we call smoke screens. Now, smoke screens will allow them to feel more socially acceptable and to weasel their way out of conversation, so that way they don't feel forced to buy from you. Now, examples of this would be they need to speak to their spouse, or they need to run the numbers and then think about it for a day or two, or they believe that this is too expensive and that they might not be able to afford it. However, the fact of the matter is, if your agency was guaranteed to work and to get them to their goals, would they really need to go and think about it? Would finances really be a problem? Or wouldn't they get creative to find a solution? The answer to all of these questions is no, because they would understand and trust that you would get them the result that you promised. And the best way to explain this concept is to imagine that you have been diagnosed with a terminal illness and the doctors have given you only a few months to live. However, there's a newly developed medication that is guaranteed to save your life and cure your illness. But there's a catch. The cost of this medication is $100,000. Even if you didn't have $100,000 to your name, you would do everything in your power to come up with the money because it's your only chance at saving your life. You might borrow money, you might sell assets, you might take out loans, or find other creative ways to raise the funds, because what other choice do you have? And that is how you want your prospects to view your agency. They need to trust that your agency can deliver the results they need, so much so that they will do anything it takes to make sure they can work with you. At that stage, all objections about money, time, or other factors will melt away. So now, you can see it's not because they don't need to talk to their spouse, they don't have the money, or they need to think about it. It's because they simply don't trust that you are the person or agency to get them to their goals. So, like I said, if you want the best chance at closing clients, you need to be able to prevent and smell out smokescreens. Luckily, every objection, no matter how unique it may seem, falls under one of 5 categories of objections. And those 5 types of objections are, number 1, think about it. Number 2, business partner or spouse. Number 3, finances. Number 4, doubt. And number 5, which is actually my favorite, logistics. Now, knowing these 5 categories will make your job to handle these objections a whole lot easier, because you will be able to put frameworks in place to handle them to the best of your abilities. Now, these frameworks will help you overcome any objection ever thrown your way. So, let's dig into it. Listen, there are 5 steps to overcome any of these objections. Step 1 is to diffuse the objection. You see, many beginners in sales see objections as rejections and immediately become defensive, which is the last thing that you want to do, by the way. Instead, you want to avoid confronting them and make them feel their thoughts and concerns are valid, at least for the moment. So, in any case where the prospect would say they need to think about it or they need to speak to their spouse, things you would say to diffuse the objections would be, I can respect that, I totally understand that, or yeah, that's not a problem at all. The reason why we say that is because we want the prospect to feel as if we're on their side, because at this stage, the prospect has basically said no, and it's only normal for them to expect you to push back and try to get them to buy. So if you do it wrong, they're gonna enter into this fight or flight state. And at that stage, the sale is lost. And you can forget about ever trying to get them to buy, because they won't. A really good way to explain the fight or flight state in this situation would be for you to picture yourself at 10 years old, for example, and your mom has just asked you to brush your teeth and get ready for bed, to which your answer is no. Now, you know fully well that because you said no, you are about to pick a fight and can expect your mom to push back and get frustrated with you. Now, that's exactly how prospects feel when they give you an objection, which is why the best thing you can do is to show that you are on their side to diffuse the situation and get them out of the fight or flight state. Now, once this is done, we can move on to step 2, which is a reframe. Now, as I mentioned before, most objections are just smoke screens. But before we can get rid of the smoke screen and dig up the real objection, you have to shift their focus away from the objection and towards the goal that they are looking for. Stephen Covey famously said, begin with the end in mind. So what we want to do here is to reframe their perspective to the end goal. And this is where you need to find out if they believe working with you can actually help them get to their goals. So you can do that by saying things like, yeah, so just so I know, before you think about this, do you actually feel like we can get you to your goals? Because for me personally, that's the only part that really matters in my eyes. Now, we do this because when the prospect starts thinking about their goals, they are then reminded of the reason they considered your service in the first place. And this makes the conversation more outcome focused and allows you to steer the conversation in the right direction. But also, most importantly, allows you to get a sense of how convicted they are in your service. And you do this by paying attention to their tonality when you ask them whether they believe you can get them to their goals. Because some people will say, yes, and that's them basically trying not to be rude. So you always have to pay attention to the tonality. And if your gut tells you that there's something more to it, then you need to address it. And you can do that by saying things like, from your tonality just there, I can sense that maybe something is missing in your eyes. And if you're not being honest with me, maybe you're just being polite, but I'd rather know fully what's on your mind. If it's not the right fit, then it's not the right fit. So to go back, do you really feel like we can get you to your X desired goal? And at that point, you've basically skipped down to step 4 of the framework, which is isolating the objection. And now you can overcome it, which I'm going to break down in step 5 for you. Now, the next step is the tie down. Now, if you went through the previous step and their tonality didn't shed light on any doubts they had, and they actually seemed confident that you could get them to where they wanted to be, then you can move on to this step. Now, a tie down is essentially a micro commitment that gets you a yes or an agreement throughout the sales process and indicates to you that the customer is following along and that they agree with everything you have to say, basically mirroring it back to you. Now, tie downs are super important because they give you a lot of valuable feedback as to where your prospect is in terms of the sales process. They also allow you to control the call, develop a yes momentum, and give you an idea of how close or how far away you are from the deal. So, how do we use tie downs? Well, once they've shared whether or not they feel like your service can help them, you basically have to get them to tell you why your service can help them achieve the results that they're looking for. So basically saying things along the lines of, okay, cool. Why do you feel like that's the case? Or you just say, anything else? You want to make it sound natural for how you talk. It should genuinely feel like a friend supporting another friend in a decision. And this gets them to verbalize all the aspects of your service that they realize they need, and it also strengthens their commitment, which ultimately reduces doubt. And this puts them right where we want them and allows us to move on to step 4, which is where the actual sale starts. You see, in step 4, you isolate the real objection. You see, once they've communicated that yes, and that your service will get them the results that they're looking for, and they've given you the reasoning as to why they feel this way, now is the time to find out what the actual objection is. So you would basically say something along the lines of, yeah, got you. Now, when you think about it, what specifically do you feel like you need to think about? Just so I have an understanding and maybe I can help. Now from here, you'll get the actual objection, whether it's purely financial, they don't think they have enough time, or anything else. But this is the real objection that you have to overcome, which brings us to step 5, which is overcoming the objection. You see, once the objection is isolated, you can overcome it via analogies, logic, and reframes. Now this really depends on the type of prospect you're dealing with. As Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, know your enemy and know yourself, and you can fight 100 battles without disaster. So the better you understand your prospect, the better you'll be at deciding what sort of analogies and reframes suit that prospect. And at this stage, being confident and firm will be your greatest asset. Now, a lot of people mistake being firm for being rude, but that's a complete fallacy. The way you want to view it is you have your client's best interest at heart and you're trying to help them understand that this is the right decision for them. You basically need to have a service over sales mentality, because the truth is 1 out of 10 are never going to buy. 1 out of 10 are guaranteed to buy regardless, but 8 out of 10 will need your help to decide. So your ability to help them decide and do so from a place of authority will help you win them in your favor. Now, to tie this all together, I have created an objection playbook, which you can access through the link in the description. It will contain a bunch of goodies to help you on sales calls and sign more clients. But before you go and download the objection playbook, I must say it is essential for you to find what works best for you. You see, everyone's sales style is different, and using the exact word tracks that I've given might not work for you. So use it as a source of inspiration and add your own twist. And lastly, always remember, the goal is never to handle objections. You want easy sales calls and smooth closes. So if you conduct your discovery calls correctly, hopefully you won't even have any objections to handle in the first place. However, I made this video specifically for those sticky situations where objections still arise. So now you're ready to go sign more clients. So on that note, happy hunting. And as always, I'm watching from afar and I'm rooting for you.